For today's story, we discuss Brian Laundrie and his notebook that he left behind confessing to the murder of Gabby Petito. Hello everyone and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you enjoy this legal education content, and today will be the day I earn that subscription. For today's story, it is Brian Laundrie, who murdered Gabby Petito long ago, but of course is in the news because the parents are suing each other. Not for long, I imagine, because the court has already heard the motion to dismiss, which I imagine will be granted any day now. In any event, a notebook written by Brian Laundrie has been released, which I suppose makes sense because the investigation's over, because, there's nothing really left to do. So we're going to read this notebook and what it has to say from Brian Laundrie for whatever value it has to offer us. So let's go ahead and get started with this. First, here is a picture of the notebook in question. His writing's not too bad, it notes. My writing is truly horrible. So this is notebook apparently written in his own handwriting. As you can see, it's been smudged and watermarked on all, but no worries. Fortunately, the words have been already extracted so we can read them in a less difficult to read medium, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here's apparently what this notebook says. Gabby, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. I'm going to be through every memory we made, getting you more excited for the future. But we lost our future. I can't live without you. I've lost every day we could spend together, every holiday. I'll never get to play with eligible again. Never go hiking with TJ. I love you more than anything. I can't bear to look at our photos, to recall such great times, because it's why I cannot go on. When I close my eyes, I will think of laughing on the roof of the van, falling asleep to the sight of whatever. I will always love you. It makes you wonder where things went wrong, to be honest. And to some degree. If you were reading Gab's journal, looking at photos from our life together, flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. Knowing that every day you'll wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up. I'm so sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life, but I know adored by many. I'm so sorry to her family because I love them. I consider her younger siblings my best of friends. I'm so sorry to her family. This is a shock to them as well as terrible grief. They loved as much, if not more than me. A new daughter to my mother, an aunt to my nephews. Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy. Rushing back to our car to try to cross the streams of blood, whatever, before it got too dark to see, too cold, I heard a splash and scream. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment, shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping. She is freezing cold. Blank the blazing hot national parks in Utah. The temperature had dropped to freezing and she was soaking wet. I carried her as far as I could from the stream to the car, stumbling, exhausted and shocked when my ineligible and I knew I couldn't safely carry her. I started a fire and spooned her as close to heat. She was so thin, she'd already been freezing too long. I couldn't at the time realize I should have started a fire first, but I wandered out of the cold back to the car. From where I started the fire, I had no idea how far the car might be, only that it was across the creek. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, she couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bump on her forehead that eventually got larger. Her feet hurt, her wrist hurt, but she was shaking, freezing, violently shaking. While carrying her, she continually made sounds of pains, laying next to her little, lasping between violent shakes, grasping in pain, begging for an end to a pain. It sounds like a lot of hypothermia. She would fall asleep and I'd shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion. She would wake in pain, starting her whole painful cycle again. Furious, I was the one waking her. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek, though, like me, the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. I don't know the extent of her injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that's what she wanted. But I now see all the mistakes I made. I panicked, I was in shock, but from that moment I decided it took away her pain. I knew I couldn't go on without her. I rushed home to spend any time I had left with my family. I wanted to drive north and let James or TJ kill me, but I wouldn't want them to spend time in jail over my mistake, even though I'm sure they would have liked to. I'm ending my life not because of a fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her. I've lost our whole future together, every moment we could have shared. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. Please do not make it harder for my family. They have lost a son and daughter. The most wonderful girl in the world. Gabby, I'm sorry. I've killed myself in this creek, by this creek, in the hope the animals may tear me apart. That makes some of their family happy. Please pick up all of my things. Gabby hated those who littered. Apparently, here's a statement after the fact. After the notebook contents were released by Laundrie's family attorney, an attorney for Gabby Petito's released the following. I'm shocked that within 30 minutes of time we left the FBI office, the notebook was released. Neither myself nor Joe Petito nor Nicole Schmidt released that notebook. Okay. Well, that's a lot. So, I suppose it depends to some degree whether or not you believe any of that. Because, I mean, that sounds, at least on some levels, plausible. Because, unfortunately, people do occasionally, and somewhat more than occasionally actually, get in way over their heads when hiking around the woods and go woefully unprepared. And, you know, nature, unfortunately, is not very kind. And sometimes people will go into nature wearing, you know, not much, get trapped in rain or whatever, and sometimes they don't come back because nature isn't always kind. So I suppose it depends how much of this story you believe or not. I mean, Brian Laundrie does admit to killing her, so his credibility is obviously somewhat questionable. But then again, just because it's questionable doesn't mean it's a lie. So I suppose it depends whether or not you believe him. And then even if you believe him, I suppose it depends whether or not you understand or sympathize with him on any level. I don't know. I've never been in such a situation. And with the grace of God, I'll never have to be in such a situation. These seem like questionable decisions to me at best. You know, unless this person was like truly like bleeding out or something and you were trying to end it faster that way or something. But, you know, it seems odd to me to make these decisions. But then again, they're young. You're young. He's panicking. Maybe making bad decisions. So, you know, I don't know. But it sounds, at least from what he's writing, and it could, of course, be all justification after the fact, could all be self-aggrandizement in some ways. But it sounds like, you know, he cared for her. I suppose an autopsy of Petito would help a lot, because that would help a lot with determining about hypothermia and stuff like that. That would somewhat validate aspects of his story. And whether or not he made decisions that are on some level sympathizable and understandable. And or not. So, you know, I don't know. And people are pointing out that, you know, they weren't that far from, you know, help maybe. Their car was 10 minutes away, but, you know, 10 minutes maybe is too far and all the rest of it. But it's an interesting thing. This, of course, will in no sense whatsoever impact the lawsuit against Brian Laundrie's parents. Because, of course, all this is hearsay. It is not a statement against against the parents' interests. It's a statement against Brian Laundrie's interests. So it's admissible in a lawsuit against him or his estate. So it's admissible in that sense. But it's not admissible in a lawsuit against the parents because it's not a statement against their interests. It's all hearsay. So it doesn't matter there. So the case against the parents will continue to be dismissed, I'm quite sure. But it's a very interesting description. And, you know, makes it very contemplative about it. So I guess I'll end the stream by asking you guys, what do you think? Do you believe it? Do you believe the story Brian Laundrie is making? Do you believe that Gabby Petito fell into some water and was suffering from hypothermia? Do you believe that Brian Laundrie was attempting to care for her and couldn't figure out exactly what to do in terms of trying to care for her? And do you believe that in the end he thought that he was doing the right thing? And I suppose you could even go one step further. Do you believe that he did the right thing on some level? So I think these are interesting questions, and then we'll leave you with those questions. And at least for the moment, that brings us to the end of the discussion of this story. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you enjoyed this legal education content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We appreciate your continuing support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.